I'd say Microsoft was an interesting one. I mean, we saw a lot of hype coming off the back of Sony. Microsoft's actually kind of divided people quite a lot for reasons we'll come on to after we go through some of the main kind of game headlines, because obviously they've been taking a big, I guess, change in tack from a business perspective in terms of, in the same conference, they came out and released, and made the announcements of the Xbox One S and also Project Scorpio they've been working on, which is, and it's a pretty dramatic move. You know, you open your conference saying, by the way, we've got a nice new compact Xbox One, the power supply is all inside, it's all great. Now's the time to buy a new Xbox One, and it will no longer be 4 times the size of your PS4. But then they go through all the different lists of games that you can potentially play on it. Obviously, now pushing the cross-platform stuff of trying to unify Windows 10 and Xbox as kind of a single platform, which personally I feel is great. But especially when they're kind of obviously on pure numbers, losing the kind of the console war with Sony.
Oh, they're getting destroyed.
Then they come out with the announcement of Project Scorpio, which is an interesting one. You can see exactly why they've done it, in terms of they know they're behind on spec, slightly, with the PS4, and obviously the PS4 Neo's in the works, and they want to make sure they stay ahead of the curve. And by unifying the platforms to try and make sure you've got a similar experience on PC and on Xbox One, incremental hardware releases kind of makes sense. I mean, the time difference between the Xbox and the Xbox 360, for example, is the same as what we've just seen. It's about kind of 4 years between the Xbox One and what would now be Scorpio. But it seems odd to me to have made this announcement now and not potentially saved it for maybe E3 2017, when you effectively tell everyone at the start of your conference, now's the time to buy an Xbox One, and then say, actually, you'd be a bit of a mug to buy an Xbox One right now because we're going to be releasing a brand new one with like a hell of a lot more hardware that can run 4K games and et cetera, and power VR releases pretty soon.
So there was a really interesting interview with Phil Spencer that Eurogamer did, where he said if you don't have a 4K television, you shouldn't buy the Scorpio. You should buy the One S.
You won't see the difference.
He said you won't see any benefit if you don't have a 4K TV, which implies that all it's doing is 4K, and that if you're not playing at 4K, there won't be any.
Yeah. However, there's a big but to that, which is big but, where there's been some quite conflicting bits of information coming out, because there was actually a bit of conversation that leaked back out again afterwards. I say leaked, it was out there, around how developers would have the option, if they wanted to actually develop Scorpio-only titles, but which was like, whoa, okay, that changes everything.
Yeah, that's a big deal, because Sony were very explicit about not doing that with theirs.
Yeah, and they were in the conference as well. And then one of the team, I'm trying to remember exactly who, actually came out on Twitter afterwards. I think it was Aaron Greenberg, came out afterwards and said that great thing is Project Scorpio is part of the Xbox One family. All your games will work. No Scorpio exclusives. No one gets left behind. Which, as the guys at Eurogamer, I think, made the same comparison. It was saying no man gets left behind almost alludes to this kind of injury they've just dealt potentially their current user base. But it's mixed messages, and I think that's something we've seen a lot with Microsoft. I mean, from a conference that was really angling on now it's cross-platform and stuff, and was such a positive message throughout. I was slightly jarred by almost a return to form of kind of these real mixed messages. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of continues to pan out, as obviously the conversation is going to continue raging as we go on over the coming months. But yeah, big changes afoot at Microsoft, turning the Windows platform into something which is kind of unified across all. I mean, the single biggest part of that, really, which is a massive plus, especially for those of us who own a PC and a console and maybe put in much more time on one platform than the other, the fact that you'll be able to buy games on one platform and now own it on both is great. I mean, that's a dilemma. I've had that dilemma with so many games, and I know you guys have too.
That's absolutely.
It'd just be nice if they added if they could add some Steam integration, because no one really wants to be buying their games through the Windows 10 App Store.
I've heard it's terrible.
So I think that's the thing, right? That's the whole thing with this, is to get people into their Windows store because they want to use that.
I actually tried to buy Gears of War on the Windows Store, and I couldn't figure out how to do it.
Really?
Really?
Oh, God.
Give me your money, Microsoft.
So for any Microsoft guys listening out there, please let Salem give you his money. Just tell him the way. If you can get in touch, we'll include a link to his Steam page. Wink, wink. And Maybe you can just chuck it on the store there. Throw it through green light if you really have to.
Sorry, just for context, guys, I don't. I mainly play on PS4. So I don't actually have Windows 10, so I've never actually tried the Windows 10 store yet. So I don't even know how bad it is. I've just heard it's awful.
Let me give you an example here. I just pulled it up because I have Windows 10. I just pulled it up, and you there's no actual button that's labeled buy. There's just a little white rectangle with the price, and it is a button. It just doesn't look like a button until you put your mouse over it. And then you click on it, and never mind you the fact that you're actually logged into your computer, and the app is actually installed on your copy of Windows, which you logged into with your Windows ID. It still wants you to put in your password.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. It says, please enter your PIN. And then having entered my PIN, it then I think came and told me, that's great, your PIN is correct. Now can you please enter your password? And I'm like, come on, man. Like, ease up.
Are you sure you want to buy this? Are you sure?
They're looking out for our wallets.
Yeah, digressions aside. Let's face it, I mean, maybe we'd all be slightly better off if Gaben looked out for our wallets the same way that Microsoft are doing.
That's very true.
But that's fine. They just want us all to buy a copy of Windows 10, which again, God, you know, I work in marketing. I can't really speak. I know why they'd want to do that. So let's go aside before I lose half our audience for me being a big corporate scumbag. And move on to the games that were released there. We'll obviously have to try and skim through some of these, but okay, bang, we open up with Gears of War 4 with the kind of this almost like the kind of the windy dust-based combat mission. Is it just big set pieces, or are we actually getting a shed load of new gameplay?
So when they showed it last year for the first time, I wasn't really interested. And then this year I was, and I don't really know why, but I think it might just be that enough time's passed that I'm interested in playing it again.
Given you've just expressed a load of enthusiasm about Dishonored 2 and now this, I think the correlation just seems to be between you liking games and them having a lot of gut stabbing. Because she kind of put her chainsaw gun aside at one point and just went straight for the stomach. And I'm like, wow, okay, you really don't like these alien invaders.
I'm all for that. Also, they're revamping Horde. They did announce Horde 3.0, and I'm really excited about that because Horde in Gears of War 3 is one of the best survival modes I've played. I don't think it quite matches up to Mass Effect 3 for me, but it's good.
And let's be honest, I mean, Gears of War still, I mean, right back to kind of the originals, it still stands as one of the coolest co-op experiences you can have. And that's why, as well, again, going back to the cross-platform, they now talked about how across all platforms that Gears of War is going to be released on, there was going to be full cross-platform co-op play, which is great. Because, again, I mean, the only real issue we've ever seen with cross-platform play is, sorry, guys, with controllers, you'll probably get headshotted pretty fast. So seeing more and more of that for co-op releases is great.
Well, you're right. I mean, I played mostly on a console, and yeah, mouse and keyboard versus a controller in that kind of game, you're gonna get screwed.
You know what? I'm in an interesting position where I am primarily a PC player, but I almost always use an Xbox One pad to play with.
Yeah, and I don't think that's uncommon now. I mean, I would say that I'm the same for certain genres. I would never play a racing or a third-person game largely without a controller. But when it comes to first-person games, that's when I instantly switch to mouse and keyboard. It's only if I'm playing competitively. I mean, actually, I probably do slightly better when I'm playing competitively with a controller, purely because other people are restricted slightly in how fast they can get to my head. So I've got at least a slight chance. I think the epitome of that for me was playing GTA 5 on PC, where I would actually find myself, again, when playing online, that is, driving around with a controller, and then the moment I got out of my car and was having to engage in combat with other players, I would throw the controller onto the desk and grab my mouse and keyboard and then hop back in a car, pick the controller back up again, purely because it was the only way I could actually perform to any kind of standard.
I think that was quite common though with GTA on PC. Like, loads of people did switch between the controller and mouse and keyboard.
It just gets pretty. There were definitely times where I would throw the controller down so vigorously because I was under fire that it would slide off the side of the desk and be kind of lost to the depths of my cable tangle.
Anyway, back on Gears of War. One thing I thought was pretty cool about the trailer that they showed last year is it kind of showed off more of the horror elements of Gears of War. And I think the world that they've got, sometimes it's a little bit underused. So when they do show more of that, I'm into that. So unfortunately, I don't have an Xbox One, but I'm still interested to see where they go with Gears 4.
I mean, yeah, Christ. 'Cause, I mean, we saw with obviously the death of of Dom's wife and with Ty and stuff. There were some pretty dark moments even in the in the early games. So seeing that touched upon more it's a real right context for it.
Yeah, definitely.
Then obviously we've talked about Battlefield 1 already, so we won't kind of necessarily spare much more time there to rehash. But then they looked at Forza Horizons 3. Again, I've never really been a massive one for the racing games, apart from kind of things like the Burnout series for obvious reasons. Maybe I just like gratuitous crashing. But how about you guys?
I've never actually played a Forza game, but they all look very, very pretty, and this one doesn't seem to deviate too much.
Yeah, looks pretty. Looks like a Forza game. I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah, I mean, I have Forza Horizons. I've walked in on my flatmate playing it in the living room a number of times. That's about as far as it goes.
I like how you make it sound like a bad thing.
Huh? Yeah, I know. I walked in, he's just there like, what? Covering himself
What
with
are you
controller.
doing?
I'm shifting.
Maybe the fact that he wasn't dressed at the time adds something to it. But yeah, it was a beautiful looking game. Shed loads of vehicle types as well. Some of the other kind of Forza games we've seen have been very track based, or the classic kind of exploring an environment and driving around just normal kind of roads. Or so seeing like things like the desert landscapes and the Jeep tracks, that sort of thing was really cool. Then we have one that's a bit more iconic, and probably a lot of people are talking about at the moment, which was Recore, which I guess we still don't know a huge amount about at this stage.
Very interested in that.
Looks gorgeous.
Looks great. I love like some of like the platforming elements they were doing with it, and like with the obviously your core, the pet and stuff. But isn't it Retro making this? The guys who did the Metroid games, Metroid Prime series.
I know Keiji Inafune's involved, but I can't remember the rest of the team. Which he did Metroid Prime, so.
Yeah, it looks really cool. It's one of the ones which is making me look at like, is that just Xbox One, or is that also the Windows 10 thing?
That's Windows 10 as well.
Pretty much that was the real thing to come out of this conference, is that, hey, basically everything is coming to Windows 10.
Yeah, Xbox has now become kind of an umbrella term for gaming with Microsoft, basically. It's no longer the box itself. The box can be your laptop, your desktop, whatever it might be. But it's I guess, if we stop calling it an Xbox exclusive and call it a Microsoft exclusive, maybe that's more accurate.
Yeah. The funny thing is, though, this whole conference, though, it doesn't really make me want an Xbox. It makes me want to build a gaming PC.
Well, exactly. Also, depending, we haven't got the prices yet for Project Scorpio. If they come out and say it's going to be a £600-700 box, then
Ooh.
Which sounds like how they're pitching
It
it.
depends on how premium it is. Like if it's got the spec to justify the price.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the specs aren't firmed up at this point, but they were talking kind of 8 cores as a speculation.
6 teraflops.
6 teraflop, exactly. Which
So they keep throwing
GPU
around.
wise, they were saying it was going to have to be.
That's a lot of teraflops.
In terms of how they're going to achieve it, I don't see a way
pixels.
they're going to be able to do it without knocking the price up. Because if you look at just like the kind of the price curve on the latest GPU architecture, it's
4K gaming right now is still pretty damn expensive.
Exactly. I mean, there's an interesting piece again, not to plug Eurogamer too much, but they've done a nice little exploration actually, kind of looking at the PS4 and PS4K Neo and the Xbox One and Project Scorpio kind of speculated specs, and again just explored kind of how they might possibly be able to achieve it. So so we don't digress too much, I guess you can go over and have a read on their site, but then come back here.
When it comes to like the Neo and obviously Project Scorpio, I'm not asked about having higher resolutions. Like 1080p is fine with me. I'd rather just, if it's got the power, fine. Can I just run it at a higher frame rate? Is it play smoother?
Exactly. Once you've got it running at a decent res, I mean that's. It depends, and also what distance you're actually sitting at. It's the same with visible pixels. Are you actually going to be sitting near enough to identify them? It's one thing if you're sitting a foot away from your PC screen versus kind of couch gaming,
Exactly.
and then when you take that sort of GPU architecture, yes, okay, it can drive higher resolution, but if you're actually getting to do more with it, like actually doing better bump mapping or whatever it might be to actually bring up the overall look and feel of the game, then
I think
great.
a lot of it as well with these new consoles is it's meant to really be to help power VR, because if you look at the power that, for example, like the
Exactly.
Oculus and the Vive need to run it, it's like the GPU alone is like a GTX 970. So you're talking, obviously I don't know too much about PC. Am I right in saying that realistically to run VR effectively, you need a PC worth about £1,000? About
It
that.
very much depends on what you're rendering. The point with VR as well, which is everyone always talks about, why do VR games look so bad? It's like, well, actually, firstly, they look more immersive once you're in game, but It's also, there are lots of things like ray effects and things which you don't actually see in real life, but they're done on flat images to kind of emulate the sensations you do get in real life. So lots of things actually do feel a bit better when you get in game. But also, yes, it's often just down to the relative specs of what you can run, and that's why it's really interesting seeing things like the announcement of, there's a shed load of stuff in the tail end of the Sony conference we'll come on to in a sec, and obviously then what we've talked about already with Fallout 4, and we've already seen VR with the Vive in things like Elite Dangerous. So seeing it translate into real games as opposed to the kind of the tech demos, and equally we've seen a lot more indies now being able to get on board with things like the Vive and the Oculus Rift. I mean, a really nice one that appeared at EGX Rezzed earlier this year was things like Giant Cop, which was there at EGX last year, and just since then they got contacted by the Vive team who said, we want you guys to try this, we think it'll be great with Vive, and they were a bit hesitant about it, and now you actually see it, and it's completely intuitive. It makes perfect sense and works really, really well on there. But again, so a lot of indie games are actually being able to benefit from it really well, because the art styles have already been stylized to make them something that the guys can realistically pull together with a smaller team. So there's some great scope for it. It's still just very much early days. We then also had Final Fantasy 15, obviously, a load more footage there. We had the Titan battle, and then there was also the slightly odd featurette that we got later in the Sony conference.
Oh god, that was weird.
I mean, we'll come on to that. Well, screw it. While we're on VR, the VR featurettes at the end of the Sony reel were a bit odd. They kind of talked about how VR was going to be now kind of coming into more games, and there were going to be loads more games that were going to be featuring VR. And yet, the kind of show reel they gave us with things like the VR mission for Battlefront and that weird kind of single kind of showdown experience for Final Fantasy 15 did still feel almost like these are tech demos, but in the context of a game that's coming out. So it was a bit jarring.
Obviously, Farpoint, Resident Evil 7, and whatever Batman Arkham VR is, I'm definitely looking forward to those.
Though we don't know if that kind of Wear the Cowl is just going to be an experience where you walk around Arkham investigating some detective scenes.
I'm completely okay with that.
I heard some people talking about that, and just saying that they put the bat suit on. I didn't hear too much more about it, but talking about like how you put your arms into this thing and then it puts the gloves on. Then you put the cowl on.
So it's pretty much a Batcave simulator.
I don't know how deep it goes though.
Yeah, we'll see. Jumping back to Microsoft, but Final Fantasy 15 we were just talking about. I mean, yes, we've already seen quite a lot of this game, but let's be honest, it looks great.
Spectacular.
I don't think it was the best demo.
No.
No, not at all. It looked really clumsy, the guy who was playing it. It just, it didn't really showcase that fight very well. I'm sure when you actually play it, it's probably really cool. But just the way they showcased it, it did make the characters make everything look little bit clumsy to me. But
yeah, I think Microsoft and Ubisoft were both having a bit of a showdown to see who could get the clumsiest guys to play their games, which is a little bit odd. Not quite as polished maybe as some of the other playthroughs we saw.
Definitely.
Are they trying to steal the title away from Polygon?
I don't think anyone is going to be doing that anytime soon. That Doom footage was just that literally reminded me of there's always that moment where everyone has that kind of awkward friend or family member or girlfriend or whoever come in and say, hey, can I have a go? And you go, okay. And they try and figure out how 2 analog sticks work or how a mouse works and spend most of the time looking at the ceiling.
Controllers are difficult.
They can be.
They're real confusing.
That is my favorite thing of this entire year in gaming so far.
And just how it's
the Doom demo.
Yes.
It was pretty special.
But yeah, Final Fantasy.
But Final Fantasy 15
Anyway.
looks good, I think. Despite that demo not being the best, it's still gorgeous. I'm still really interested in it.
I'm still loving the scale of those boss fights though. That's what is really
absolutely.
refreshing. I mean, Shadow of the Colossus-esque size there. That was just awesome. And then seeing obviously you've got the kind of the rival army appearing and actually getting engaged in the fight at the same time. It's all in real time. You kind of moved away from fixed locations, turn-based combat into something which is really, really exciting, especially when it looks that damn good.
Definitely.
One that staying on combat was Killer Instinct, which got quite a large featurette actually. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I got Killer Instinct when I first got my Xbox One, but haven't really put any major time into it. It was something that it didn't really grab me in the way that, say, the Tekken games have. But again, cool to see they're doing some kind of cross IP partnerships, getting the General Ram from Gears of War in. But have you guys, any of you guys played it at all?
No, for some reason, fighting games I've just never managed to get into. But obviously that's a competitive co-op thing. It's just that's not really the kind of game I ever owned.
Yeah, I'm not huge on fighting games. I'll pick them up when they're on sale and play through the campaigns, but
I am big on fighting games, but kind of to my shame, still haven't played much Killer Instinct. But I have friends who really like it, and they're supporting that game really well, and it seems like it's paying off for them.
I mean, the play stats they quoted were pretty impressive. To be honest, I for one wasn't aware that they were anything like that sort of scale at this point, which is cool. I mean, you always see any kind of major event you go to, any of the kind of conventions, you'll always see, kind of Street Fighter and stuff having their own booths because they'll be doing little kind of like local tournaments and that sort of thing. Again, Street Fighter's one that I've always, even though it's an icon of the genre, I've often found the way the animations work a little bit jarring in so much as it feels quite punch, return to original pose, back, as opposed to that kind of fluidity of combat, which to me is what martial arts is all about. But again, I don't want to sideline us too long. Because we've got a whole load more still on the Microsoft one to talk about. So we had Inside, which, again, we saw very, very little of.
That game's out very soon, I think.
It is, yeah, and I guess they're looking to try and drop it and obviously go off the success of Limbo, because Playdead have now got a pretty nice reputation off the back of that, and they already said they're making Limbo available for free, which is great.
Oh yeah, I got that as a PSN download a few months ago, I think.
And it's a beautiful game. I mean, and this now still has that kind of, it's a very dark look and feel to Inside, but I mean, I don't know what more there is to say other than the tiny little feature we got look good. I've got every faith in the guys in the studio, so fingers crossed that comes away looking nice too. But it was, again, another nod to one of the kind of smaller, more independent style releases.
yeah, it looks like a natural progression from Limbo to this in abstract storytelling. So, a lot of the stuff I'm imagining a lot of the stuff is going to be in the environment again.
Another one that is pretty dark, but one that potentially has got a bit more information out. We've already seen some gameplay actually quite a while ago. Is We Happy Few.
That looks awesome.
Ooh.
Oh.
If you ever wanted another game with like a BioShock vibe, as if we could ever get enough of that, we've got like Brave New World meets BioShock now, and it looks really cool.
It's like BioShock mixed with clowns. Really disturbing clowns.
And we've seen in some of the early gameplay footage they released a while back, it's the fact that you literally live almost this dual world in the same way as we're talking about what you saw in Dishonored, where you can view through and see almost another time zone. Here you've got the whole, if you're hopped up on joy, everything looks great. You think the world's fantastic, everything's super happy. And the moment you start to come down off that, not only do the local populace start to turn on you because they know, but you also realise this kind of dark, grim environment around you. I think it's a really interesting gameplay mechanic for how they're actually trying to pulling it off.
Yeah, definitely.
It's Pyro World, the game.
Pretty much. Except just less chainsaws.
I was very surprised to hear people talking about it and then realise that it's not like a fully structured single player thing. And that, like, that intro thing is how the game starts, but then after you kind of get through that intro, it's a procedurally generated thing. So it's like so it's actually like completely like, replayable, and you do like you run through the game and I guess try and survive, and then you can play it again and it will be different. So I'm not quite sure how that works, but that can, because I was just expecting it to be this sort of structured single player narrative experience. So to hear that it's actually not that, it's kind of weird.
I think one thing that's just going to be, I guess, the challenge that kind of came to my mind when I heard that news was just that with a world that's got so much atmosphere like that, hopefully they won't lose the strength of narrative that that might be needed to tell that story and to kind of really immerse you in it. So I'm really hoping that it doesn't become this kind of beautiful crafted world that actually, when you try and get onto it, feels a little bit run of the mill in terms of what you actually get to do, the depth of the content. Fingers crossed it's not going to do that. I mean, it looks fantastic, and they've been pushing it a lot, so hopefully it can live up to the hype.
Yeah, I love that concept, and I was very let down by Haze, which basically did a similar thing. So let's hope they make it work.
We also had the Gwent card game, which we touched upon before, which I mean, no, I don't think anyone expected Gwent to be as kind of runaway successful kind of mini game from The Witcher 3 as it was. But it's a really cool little game. It's so simple. The games are pretty short. It's really easy to pick up and learn. So it's really nice to see that actually getting its own kind of standalone platform.
Yeah.
I never once actually won a game of Gwent.
Me neither.
I am so bad at card games.
Dude, you just need to get the cards.
Yeah, the cards they give you at the start are pretty rubbish.
Yeah, unless you go and buy or unlock or find other cards in it, it is soul destroying. You challenge like a local shoemaker to a game of Gwent in a village of 3 people where they still haven't taken down the guys that were hanged outside their village, to a game of Gwent, and Geralt, the legendary Witcher, leaves with his tail between his legs and hands over like pretty much all the earnings from his last griffin slaying, and you feel like, what am I doing with my life? You know. But once you get going and you have some decks pulled together, especially given you have to build the kind of the non kind of full test decks from scratch, it's it takes a bit of doing.
Yeah, the game sounds good. Sounds like it's got almost like a puzzle questy kind of campaign to it, where you're kind of coming against enemies with specific abilities, and you'll have to kind of build your deck around playing that person, rather than just, hey, this is my deck and I'm just going to use it all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they always probably we're going to have to do that to give it a bit of substance. If it wasn't just going to be kind of like oh, by the way, yeah, you can get Gwent now. It's free to play on iPads and shit. Go get it.
Yeah, and they've redesigned some of the cards. You've seen those? I think the Roche card has a picture of Roche standing on top of a house.
Fantastic. Because why not? Because Roche is a badass.
Because Roche gets all over the place.
Then, I mean, we talked about Killer Instinct before, but then obviously far more flagship than that, we have Tekken 7. We saw this kind of one duel down between was it Akumi and Heihachi. Knowing me, I've totally got one of their names wrong, but I think it was.
It's pretty close.
Akuma, was it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Akuma.
between Akuma and Heihachi. There you go, I can cut that. And again, it looks great. It was always going to look great. And they featured it at MCM. Actually, they had kind of a booth for where some people could get their hands on and play. And it's kind of nice how they've started to. I mean, Tekken and most beat 'em ups have always tried to kind of loosely drop some story in. It was nice, I guess, how they've done it a bit more fluidly, kind of having the kind of the FMV sequences blending into the gameplay itself a bit more naturally than previously before.
To take that kind of Mortal Kombat story vibe.
Yeah, exactly. The wonderful, we're going to reinvent canon every game because screw you, that's why.
Tekken is the game you want that for, right? With its crazy, over-the-top characters and stories, I think. And I love that they brought Akuma in, and rather than just having him be like, hey, Akuma's here because we wanted to do a crossover, they've actually tied him into the story, which is pretty wild. So
such power.
I'm kind of sad that game's not out till next year, because it's been out in arcades for a while. Like, they played it at Evo, so I don't know. I'm not quite sure what's taking them all the time to develop the console versions, but it's coming to PC as well. Yeah,
I mean, that's when they've been bringing it around the experiences. That's what's been great. They literally roll up with one of the retro arcade machines, and they're like, "Here you go, play it." And you kind of, in your head, you're like, "I feel like I'm playing Tekken 2 because I'm doing it with a stick and buttons." Like, but why does it look so good?
Do you think they're delaying it because of Street Fighter 5? Because obviously the reaction out of that was a lot of people were really unhappy with the amount of content that was in that game, because it was just.
Yeah, I guess maybe if they're spending a lot of time developing additional modes, I imagine the arcade just has the arcade and the versus mode. So perhaps it is just a case of, hey, we want to make Tekken volleyball again. Bring it back.
We are really about to get flooded by fighting games, aren't we? Because I know Injustice 2 is coming out, and between Street Fighter 5 and Tekken and what was the Killer Instinct, I mean, there's going to be a lot of fighting game options.
There's also Guilty Gear as well.
Oh yeah,
I'm very excited.
I've been meaning to look at that because it's like an anime mixed with metal fighting game, so that automatically appeals to me.
Yeah, I'd recommend it. It's a good time.
We got a bit of info as well, mixed about Dead Rising 4. Not a huge amount. It did look like a bit more of a return to form in terms of, we had #Frank's back.
Yeah, Frank's back.
And it looked a hell of a lot more like actually having fun. Kind of Dead Rising 3 almost opened up with a bit more of... It felt a bit too dark for a Dead Rising game when they did that first reveal trailer. So it's nice to see a return to form on that front. Have we got a lot to go on? Not really.
I played a bit of Dead Rising 3 and I wasn't really into it for some reason. It just didn't click with me, I think. But Dead Rising 4, because I think it kind of embraces some of the more silly aspects that the series was more known for.
Yeah,
I think it would probably be more appealing.
I played a good bit of Dead Rising 3 as well, and the silliness, it's there, but you have to go looking for it. It's not like the first two and a half games, should we say, because of Off the Record. It's not like it's not as in your face.
Yeah,
I mean, it's there, but you really have to look for it.
And that showed from the marketing and the fact that they weren't shouting about the silliness. At least here, they made a point of showing, look, here he is with a gun that, with a truck that fires zombies out the front as it scoops them up. It's like that's what Dead Rising's about. It's about going up to a desk and going, well, I found some duct tape and a chainsaw and a broom, therefore I've now got a double-ended chainsaw like blade weapon kind of glaive thing. And that's what the game's always been about. I'm hoping they bundle in co-op. I don't know if they've confirmed that yet, but obviously that was one of the coolest things about the last games, being able to actually kind of hop on and do that with friends. I mean, they're talking a lot about playing games together and cross-platform play and stuff. Hopefully that won't have been something that we lose. And then Scalebound, which again has got a lot of people really excited. How are you guys feeling about it?
It's annoying that I can't play it because I don't have those platforms to play it on. But as someone who's like a massive fan of like Devil May Cry games, so like the spectacle fighter things, I'm looking at this thing with the big giant crab and the fact that you can fight a dragon. It looks stupid and I love it.
Yeah, it's very much true to the kind of Platinum game style route, isn't it? Like you say, that look and feel. I mean, he's there doing the big kind of boss fight, and he slaps on what pretty much looked like a set of Beats kind of earphones. And it's like, really, guys.
It looks like he's trying really hard to be Dante, though.
Got to jam to that's core to the whole character.
Exactly, and it's so ridiculous that it just kind of works. Like, I'm assuming from the fact that is where he keeps calling the dragon big guy, it stuck because of the repetition constantly throughout that trailer, that I feel like that's almost a placement for, in the same way that you pick Shepard's first name and get called Shepard everywhere. I almost feel like he's going to call him audibly by a load of nicknames because you'll get, obviously, to be able to name your dragon and everything's going to be great.
Yeah, maybe.
But the co-op in that as well was really good. That was something that we hadn't really, had kind of nailed down before. Seeing that in the flesh now, and being revealed that you'd get that in more than just two players. You've got a whole host of those three guys there playing it. That's really cool.
I have to wonder. I mean, given that Devil May Cry started as a Resident Evil game, is this the game that they wanted to make when they made the last Devil May Cry?
Maybe.
Quite possibly, actually. I mean, God, he looks almost like a halfway house between young and old Dante.
I've got faith in Kamiya. He makes good games, and this I actually didn't think the co-op demo looked a little bit weird at times. Like, it was a little messy.
There were certain things that, for example, it's my little kind of bugbears as well. Just from I mean, when he was punching in that weak point on the arm, and he kept going, "Why won't you die?" The way he kind of repeatedly hit, and then the cracks just kind of, or the wounds appeared suddenly on it. It felt a little bit. Could you not have had the wound hit kind of appear where he's punched? I don't know. That's a really weird niggly bugbear, but it just certain things about how it was visually grated on me slightly, but were kind of typical of that aesthetic genre.
Yeah, it's still a really cool design though, so I'm definitely interested to see more of it and get my hands on it. Hopefully, now it's coming to Windows 10.
Plug.
That was definitely the game where I was like, man, maybe I should get an Xbox.
Same.
And now I don't.
Yeah,
have to,
that is the weird thing about this conference. Like we said, it painted Microsoft in a really good light, this cross-platform thing. But instead of, these conferences are kind of supposed to make people come away from it feeling, God, I guess I need to buy an Xbox, or God, I guess I need to buy a PS4. Whereas this kind of made me feeling like, I guess I could probably think about selling my Xbox.
But at the same time, do you think it's safe to say that? Obviously, it's mainly the consoles that are competing with each other, but because PCs, you tend to think of that platform as much more premium, because it's much more of an enthusiast-grade hardware for people who do tend to play on PCs. Do you think it's safe to say that both those companies have started to realise that they're not really competing with PC?
Well, Microsoft for a while now has been making noise about how they're going to be refocusing on the PC as a gaming platform, and I've just overlooked it every single time because I haven't seen any sort of proof that it's going to happen. But this time around, I think they really have started to realize that PC's not a competition.
Exactly.
I mean, a lot of the people that are so people that are so focused on the performance side of PC just aren't going to go and buy a console.
No, I was going to say, and the point really is, I guess, that yes, people slate them, I guess, for having that kind of seeing themselves as kind of unifying through Windows and through Xbox for Windows and all these sorts of things. But Microsoft at its heart, it's a software company. You look at that, they always have been, and therefore the Xbox was always kind of going to be a mechanism for monetizing more of their software and more of their games. And yes, obviously it's grown beyond that, but I think it totally makes sense that they're wanting to try and use this now as a way to to kind of mobilize everyone onto a single unified platform. And hell, yes, okay, people will complain, yes, it allows you to track more data and do this and blah, but it also allows simplification for developers and for them as, you know, as a kind of unified team. So it totally makes sense from a business perspective. And actually, if anything, the thing that's really on my mind now is just going to be to see how Sony follow this up, you know, and in terms of, obviously, you're not necessarily saying they're going to be doing a load with the PC market, because that's not their kind of area, but wondering how they will take to the kind of this idea of the incremental hardware releases we were chatting about before. Yes, they've already talked about the 4K Neo, but, you know, is this going to now start to get to a point where, because it's the momentum that hardware is improving, that actually, if you lag behind for 8-9 years, you know, with a new platform release, the hardware simply becomes so much more dated. But for those, so our consoles now just shifting towards trying to find a way whereby you can stay ahead of the curve without having to do the modular upgrade that comes with the PC market.
I'm perfectly okay with the consoles doing incremental upgrades if they need to, just to keep up, because PC tech in the last few years has managed to advance pretty quickly, and like I think we're reaching the stage now we've gotten as much out of these consoles as we can. I mean, I'm not someone who is really bothered by playing games at 30 frames per second or anything like that, but having the option to upgrade is always, to me, a bonus. Yeah.
Moore's law and all that jazz.
As long as it doesn't necessarily affect, like, let's say, I don't want it to be a case where the new one comes out and then the games that run on the old PS4 or the old Xbox One run really terribly, like sub 20 or anything like that.
At least one thing we are seeing a lot more of as well is backwards compatibility now. You know, they're starting to, that was kind of a big feature of last year's conferences, was kind of the fact that both Sony and Microsoft wanted to make backwards compatibility more of a thing across the platforms again, because it was, you know, it was sold in when the new gen kind of came out. It was a real shame that we saw that disappear pretty much, you know, off the face of the map, and apart from a few that started to get staggered out through the live arcade. Even back on the days of the PS3, you know, the PS3, unless you had that one 60 gig edition that had that special chip in it, you know, you didn't have backwards compatibility there either. So I
think that was the problem with it, though, that the reason that they took it out was because it was so expensive to have all that stuff in.
Exactly, because you're coding for two different whole kind of processing architectures. So it's, again, understandable technically, but frustrating to an end user.
I think the length of time in which this previous console generation lasted had a lot of people becoming really complacent about it, because it was 8 or 9 years at least, right?
Yeah, whereas the previous lag was half that.
I mean, if you look at, you know, NES to Super NES to N64 and all that,
3 to 6 years.
Yeah, that is nowhere near as long as the Xbox 360 and PS3 lasted. So I'm sorry, it's just we can't have nearly a decade between console releases anymore.
Not at all.
No.
Completely agree with you.
I mean, otherwise all it does is add more fuel to the
console peasantry,
the kind of PC master race argument, because you end up with it simply being a case of, well, no, it's not just that PCs are better. I'm sorry, it's that your console's 10 years old, which is actually a fair argument. There's no kind of dominance in that.
The other thing that annoys me when people go like full PC master is it's like, well, yeah, you've got £1,000 graphics card, mate. It's not. I'm not expecting a PS4 to compete with that. That's kind of insane. That's the only time I get a bit funny with it.
I will pull us back on topic quickly because we've just got a couple of other games to chat about before we move on to Ubi and Sony. One of the ones that was quite a nice little, again, change of kind of tone in Microsoft's conference was Sea of Thieves, which we've heard a bit of in the run-up. But again, we saw kind of against some actual gameplay footage here, starting right from the point where it had a few streamers here. Oh, it's just exploring, kind of, you know, some of them were getting drunk in the tavern, and it was really, really good fun to watch playing. Right up until they obviously then had a pitched sea battle, and you had everything from the guys down the bottom trying in vain to kind of cover up holes from the cannonballs that had been fired in, as the other guys were desperately trying to fight back. It looked really, really good fun. My one reservation is, again, going to be this classic, you've made an awesome kind of base for a game. How long is it going to last? What's the lifetime going to be? And how much fun will it be if you don't have 4 of you online at once? These sorts of questions, but hell does it look like a lot of fun, potentially.
I think I hated how they presented this game to us, because to me, yeah, the game does look pretty cool, so I'm interested to maybe try it one day, but I don't really like it when these conferences start using, like, it looked like the players was scripted. I find that kind of awkward.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
I guess that it plays in slightly to the kind of the classic kind of YouTuber audience. A lot of that stuff is scripted or semi-scripted.
It's a little weird.
It's a piece of it's an entertainment piece.
Yeah, at some point you've got to convey, hey, this is how people are going to interact playing this game, and yes, it's going to come off weird when it's scripted, but I don't really see like an easy option. I mean, I guess you could just have no one talking. But...
I mean, God, you saw that in like when they did like the Wildlands kind of gameplay later on in the comic. That was all kind of partially scripted as well. Most of them were, and it's because also you're doing it for a conference with a very set pre-allocated slot of time.
I will say, as Ubisoft being huge proponents of this, of like the classic chatter, when the Division beta came out, some of my friends and I very intentionally played up to let's all play in character and
properly role.
And it was actually quite fun. So maybe Ubisoft are onto something that we're all missing out on. Yeah, I'm joining RP servers now, guys. That's how I play
or
from now on.
that has anybody seen the video of that one guy on Battlefield going all in on that, and like he's the only one doing it?
Oh no!
Yes.
Yes, the guy who gets really over the top, and no one else in the server's doing it, but everyone loves him for it. He's just the one guy being like, Colonel, I'm heading to point A. Like, why is there no one here? We need a medic.
That's what I think of
great.
every time I see one of those videos. Every time I see one of those pre-scripted battle chatter videos, that's all I can see in my mind.
It's interesting that her certain types of game do play up to it really well, though. I mean, because actually the whole point of kind of, especially military games, where like, the whole reason why you have very military style chatter in real life is because it's efficient ways of conveying information in the shortest possible amount of time. So actually, like, just touching again on the Ubi conference, which we'll kind of come on to properly in a moment, they obviously showed Bridge Crew, the Star Trek game, which we'll have a quick chat about in a moment. And that, again, everyone slipped so into role. Obviously, they were the guys who used to actually act on the original set, so it was even easier. But that's a perfect play up to it, and you see it in certain types of game, like, because actually Bridge Crew was based off, well, not based off, but we've seen a similar game previously in the form of Artemis, which is a game that's up on Steam, and other kind of indie releases like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, where again, actually, when you're up against it time-wise and you need to get a lot of information across, people do slip into role, or at least I found so when playing it with friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just quickly carry on then, we had quite a lot of zombie games come up in this whole set of conferences. So we've had Dead Rising 4, we then went on to State of Decay 2.
I am pumped for that one.
And again, just the kind of the soft from the soundtrack through to the kind of the emotion in the characters that was being shown. It was a really nice one that, in the same way that like The Walking Dead's done, it was a nice kind of character exposition. The classic kind of the apocalypse isn't just about killing zombies; it's about the people.
The original State of Decay was one of those games that I'll start it up and I'll just lose hours. So I'm looking forward to State of Decay 2.
We then had a kind of a personally surprisingly awesome trailer for Halo Wars 2, a game that I never properly played the original, despite having kind of played all the Halo games. But I mean, that harkened me back to, on a different franchise, obviously, but I remember the intro cinematic to the first ever Dawn of War game was like, even as a kid, I used to put like the hairs on the back of my neck on end. I used to absolutely love it, and this was one of those. I thought it was one of the best trailers of the whole of E3 so far, for a game which I'm not necessarily massively hyped about, but obviously they're hand in hand with Creative Assembly, who are also obviously behind the Total War games and brought us Total War Warhammer just a little while ago. I mean, so the game looks great. It's a very different tone. It's much more kind of the classic Command and Conquer Red Alert style, hectic, frantic action gameplay, rather than perfectly positioning your archers and trying to make sure that you sweep in and do a flanking maneuver. But it looks like really great fun and a really cool trailer.
So a little bit, I would say about 30 minutes or so before we actually got on and started this thing, I was down the street at a shop and I purchased a Master Chief figure that was new. And
we should contextualize this with the fact that so actually you could probably give as much context as anyone.
Okay.
How many figurines do you currently own? Because you have a pretty damn impressive collection.
I honestly need to count them, but that would probably take all day.
Can we give us a rough estimate?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
we might be here a while, guys. He's got a lot.
About 22 shelves.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, he was. You
Yeah,
were
just on those
counting the
shelves.
shelves. That's
But the reason I bring that particular thing up, Halo Wars 2, to me, represents something very important because I had a copy of Halo Combat Evolved and I had a copy of Halo 2 on PC. And when it got to the end of Halo 2, and there was that moment, Chief, where are you going? I'm finishing this fight. I've been waiting since then to finish the fight. And the fact that there's going to be more Halo on PC gives me a hope on that.
Yeah.
even in the form of an RTS.
There's been a couple of twin stick shooters that have shown up on Steam, and the Halo Wars 2, and I know I heard, I don't mean to step on your toes here or anything, but the Forge is coming to PC.
Well, Halo 6
Yes.
has been confirmed for Windows
That's
10.
what I
right?
understand. Yes. So this is all very good news.
So fingers crossed. It took us a long time to get the previous games.
But yeah, the first Halo Wars is a neat thing, and it's a console RTS, and that's always kind of weird, but it's pretty competent, and I'm glad. I mean, they had that all units button, and every time you hit it, all your units shouted all units, and that was amazing. So just hammering that button and just having them repeat all units, all units, all units, it's a good time. But they also said that now it's coming to PC, that that it will have like a revamped control system for PC, so they're not just gonna stick you with a sort of slightly clunky console-based system, which is good news.
There is a beta. It is active now, but unfortunately is only on Xbox.
Guys. Which is fine. Totally fine.